Judy Garland said, "I do," 5 times. Twice, she married men whose private lives held a secret Hollywood was desperate to bury. One was a legendary director. Another kept a decade-long relationship going on the side, even during their marriage. In an era when one wrong headline could end a career, these unions weren't just romance, they were survival. But there's a deeper question buried in Garland's story. Why did gay men gravitate toward her more than almost any other star in history? The answer isn't what you think, and it involves 2 very different theories, the dark secret behind her rise. Joan Crawford may have eventually become one of Hollywood's most recognizable stars, but her story began far away from the glamour and luxury people would later associate with her. She was born Lucille Fay LeSueur in San Antonio, Texas, into a family that was constantly struggling to get by. Then, when Lucille was only 10 months old, her father, Thomas, abandoned the family and moved away. Suddenly, her mother, Anna, was left to raise the children and somehow hold the family together. Anna eventually remarried Henry J. Casson, an opera house manager. At first, the marriage seemed to open a new world for young Lucille. Through Casson's work, she was exposed to performers and artists she could hardly have imagined meeting, including the legendary ballerina Anna Pavlova. But behind the excitement was something much darker. For years, Lucille believed Casson was her biological father. Yet when she was around 11 years old, he began mistreating her. The experience became one of the darkest chapters of her childhood, something she would carry with her for years. Home was no longer a place where she felt safe. So, like many people desperate to escape a painful childhood, Lucille began looking for another way out. While attending Rockingham Academy, she became involved with a trumpet player named Ray Sterling. Unlike the chaos she knew at home, the relationship appears to have given her some stability. Sterling even encouraged her academic ambitions, but Lucille had already started dreaming about something much bigger. In 1922, she walked away from both her education and her relationship with Sterling. Instead of finishing college, she began chasing a career as a dancer, joining chorus lines and performing across the country. It was a huge gamble. But this time, the gamble worked. Before long, Lucille was getting small parts in Hollywood films. Yet there was an immediate problem. The studios did not think Lucille LeSueur sounded like the name of a major movie star. MGM publicity chief Pete Smith reportedly thought the surname sounded too much like sewer. So the studio came up with a publicity stunt. Newspapers invited the public to participate in a nationwide Name the Star contest and choose a new name for the young actress. The winning choice was actually Joan Arden, but MGM discovered that another actress was already using the name. So the studio settled on Joan Crawford. The irony was that Crawford never particularly liked the name herself. But whether she liked it or not, it would eventually become one of the most famous names in Hollywood. The name change was only the beginning of her struggle. In the 1925 film Lady of the Night, Crawford was not exactly being treated like a future superstar. She was essentially used as a body double for MGM's biggest female star at the time, Norma Shearer. For Crawford, it must have been a painful reminder of where she stood in the Hollywood pecking order. And she hated being second. She quickly developed a reputation for ambition, determination, and a willingness to fight for every opportunity. Norma Shearer became one of her biggest rivals, partly because Shearer was married to MGM studio executive Irving Thalberg and seemed to have access to the best roles. Crawford reportedly resented the advantage and privately complained that competing with Shearer was almost impossible because of her relationship with the studio boss. Hollywood was full of rumors about how ambitious actresses got ahead, and Crawford eventually became the subject of plenty of them herself. There were stories that she used romantic relationships to help advance her career, including an alleged affair with married director Vincent Sherman. Sherman later described Crawford as unusually direct and confident in their relationship. His wife reportedly reacted with surprising calm when she discovered what had happened, apparently believing that resisting Joan Crawford would have been a difficult task for almost any man. Whether every Hollywood rumor was true or not, one thing was becoming increasingly obvious. Crawford was determined to control her own destiny. When she felt MGM was not promoting her properly, she did not simply sit around and wait for the studio to notice her. She began promoting herself. She entered dance contests around Hollywood, appeared wherever she thought photographers might be watching, and made sure her name kept showing up in newspapers. One screenwriter later captured the essence of Crawford's rise perfectly. She became a star because she decided she was going to become one. Then, in 1928, the opportunity she had been waiting for finally arrived. Joan Crawford appeared as a flapper in Our Dancing Daughters, and suddenly Hollywood was paying attention. The movie turned her into a major star almost overnight. She became the next big it girl after Clara Bow, and the woman who had once been struggling to get noticed was now one of Hollywood's hottest young actresses. But fame came with its own problems. In 1929, Crawford entered her first major Hollywood marriage when she married Douglas Fairbanks Jr., the 19-year-old son of legendary stars Douglas Fairbanks Sr. and Mary Pickford. Crawford was several years older than him, but the age difference was hardly the biggest issue. Her new in-laws reportedly wanted little to do with her. Fairbanks Sr. and Mary Pickford lived at Pickfair, one of the most famous estates in Hollywood. Yet the newlyweds were not welcomed there for months. When Crawford was finally invited inside, she found herself entering a world where social status, reputation, and carefully controlled appearances mattered enormously. Her relationship with Mary Pickford was especially difficult. Even when Crawford managed to improve her relationship with Fairbanks Sr., the tension between the two women remained. Pickford could reportedly become distant whenever she and Crawford were alone, leaving the young actress feeling like an outsider in her own marriage. But Crawford had no intention of allowing anyone to push her out of Hollywood. She knew she had a weakness that could potentially destroy her career, her Southwestern accent. So she attacked the problem with the same determination she brought to everything else. She spent hours reading books and magazines aloud, repeating words until her pronunciation became sharper and more polished. Then Hollywood changed. The silent film era was giving way to talking pictures, and suddenly, an actress's voice mattered just as much as her face. Crawford had prepared for that moment. By 1932, she had become the third highest-grossing star in Hollywood, backed by a string of successful talkies. The former chorus girl from Texas had fought her way into the upper ranks of the movie business. But while her career was reaching new heights, her marriage was falling apart. Crawford's relationship with Douglas Fairbanks Jr. had become increasingly unstable. Both spouses were reportedly involved with other people, and Crawford began an affair with Clark Gable, one of Hollywood's biggest heartthrobs. Fairbanks was hardly innocent. He was pursuing Katharine Hepburn and reportedly involved in several other affairs. The marriage was clearly heading toward its breaking point. What made Crawford and Gable's relationship especially scandalous was how openly they behaved. They were both married, yet they did little to hide their attraction. At one party attended by both couples, writer Adela Rogers St. John's reportedly discovered Crawford and Gable together behind a bandstand in an unmistakably intimate situation. Instead of panicking or trying to explain herself, Crawford apparently greeted St. John's with complete confidence, almost as if she had simply been caught chatting with an old friend. The following day, she reportedly sent St. John's flowers with a playful note suggesting that she must have enjoyed the spectacle. That was Crawford. Even when she found herself in a scandalous situation, she often seemed determined to control the story rather than allow the story to control her. As the years passed, Crawford developed a reputation for intense romantic relationships and an unconventional personal life. Hollywood gossip followed her everywhere, adding another layer to the already larger-than-life image she was building. But behind the headlines, her marriage to Fairbanks continued to deteriorate. Crawford accused him of being intensely jealous and suspicious of the people around her, including close friends. Their arguments reportedly became frequent and explosive, sometimes continuing deep into the night. By 1933, the marriage was over. Crawford filed for divorce, citing grievous mental cruelty. Once again, her personal life had collapsed, but her career was moving in the opposite direction. Crawford was becoming more than just another successful actress. She was developing a recognizable image of her own. One of the most famous parts of that image was her use of exaggerated shoulder pads. The style created a stronger, sharper silhouette and came to represent the confidence and independence associated with modern women of the era. Soon, other Hollywood actresses were copying the look. Crawford had turned fashion into another part of her star power, and MGM was not about to let her momentum slow down. Almost immediately after her divorce, the studio placed her in Dancing Lady alongside Clark Gable and a rising young actor named Franchot Tone. The casting could hardly have been more complicated. Crawford had already shared a controversial relationship with Gable, and now another leading man was entering her life. She reportedly worried that she was moving too quickly, but that did not stop her from falling for Tone. In 1935, Joan Crawford married Franchot Tone. For a woman who had spent her entire life fighting for control, success, and recognition, it looked like the beginning of another chapter. Unfortunately, it would not be the happy ending she was hoping for. How one romance fueled decades of hate. Joan Crawford was fiercely ambitious about her Hollywood career, but there was one problem she kept running into. The men she married did not always share that same hunger for fame. Douglas Fairbanks Jr. had been far more interested in politics than building a Hollywood empire. Franchot Tone was different. He was a serious, traditional theater actor who cared deeply about the stage and had little interest in chasing the kind of movie stardom Joan wanted for both of them. Joan became determined to turn him into the movie star she believed he could be. She pushed, encouraged, and pressured him to embrace Hollywood, but the harder she tried, the more exhausted she became. And behind closed doors, their marriage was falling apart. Joan desperately wanted children, but both of her pregnancies ended in heartbreaking miscarriages. The losses left her physically exhausted and emotionally devastated. Instead of helping her through the grief, Franchot reportedly sank deeper into depression and frustration. He began drinking heavily, and the tension inside the marriage turned violent. During their arguments, he physically attacked Joan. For Crawford, it was a horrifying return to something she had already known as a child. The abuse she had spent years trying to escape was now following her into adulthood. Eventually, Joan had enough. She refused to accept the violence any longer, and in 1939, she divorced Franchot Tone. But even as her marriage ended, another battle was already waiting for her. Crawford's star power had been fading, and Hollywood had started questioning whether she was still worth the money she commanded. Then, in May 1938, the criticism became impossible to ignore. A widely discussed article labeled Crawford as box office poison, arguing that her salary no longer matched her ability to bring audiences into theaters. For someone who had spent her entire life chasing fame and public approval, it was a brutal humiliation, and Crawford did not take it quietly. By the beginning of the 1940s, her life seemed to move at a frantic pace. Yet the decade initially brought her something she had wanted for years: motherhood. After struggling for so long to have a child of her own, Crawford adopted a baby girl through an agency in Las Vegas. She initially gave the child her own name before quickly changing it to Christina. But motherhood would not bring Crawford the peaceful family life she had imagined. In 1942, she entered her third marriage, this time to actor Philip Terry. The relationship had moved incredibly quickly. They had been dating for only about 6 months when they married. The couple adopted a baby boy named Christopher, but their happiness was short-lived. The child's biological mother eventually reclaimed him. For Joan, losing Christopher was devastating. She had already suffered multiple miscarriages, and now she was experiencing another painful loss involving a child she had come to love as her own. But Crawford did not stop. Soon afterward, she and Terry adopted another baby boy. They initially named him Philip Terry Jr., giving him his adoptive father's name. Then the marriage began to collapse. By 1946, Joan and Philip Terry were divorced. And in the middle of all that turmoil, Joan made a decision that revealed just how emotionally complicated her relationship with her family had become. She changed the boy's name. Philip Terry Jr. became Christopher. It was almost as if Crawford was trying to replace the child she had lost by giving her new son the same name. Meanwhile, Crawford's professional life was reaching another major crossroads. In 1945, she set her sights on the lead role in Mildred Pierce. There was just one problem. Director Michael Curtis did not want her. He reportedly saw Crawford as a fading star and had little patience for the image she had built around herself. Her famous broad-shouldered look, which had once been considered glamorous and powerful, had become something he openly disliked. But Crawford wanted the role badly, and Joan Crawford had never been particularly good at accepting no for an answer. She fought for the part, and eventually won it. That decision created an explosive working relationship between Crawford and Curtis. The two reportedly clashed constantly, with Curtis remaining suspicious of Crawford's trademark shoulder pads. At one point, he reportedly interrupted a costume fitting and physically inspected her clothing because he wanted to make sure she was not secretly wearing the shoulder pads he hated so much. It was an almost absurd level of conflict, but Crawford had the last laugh. Mildred Pierce became a major success with both critics and audiences, and after years of fighting to prove that she still belonged at the top, Crawford finally received the recognition she had been chasing for decades. At the 1946 Academy Awards, she won the Oscar for Best Actress. There was only one problem. Joan Crawford was not even there to receive it. Her old insecurities had taken over before the ceremony. Convinced that Ingrid Bergman would win, Crawford stayed home, expecting another disappointment. Then the news arrived. She had won. Crawford immediately went into action. She contacted her makeup team, prepared herself from the comfort of her bed, and arranged for photographers to capture the moment. By the following morning, images of Joan Crawford celebrating her Oscar were appearing in newspapers. Once again, she had turned a moment of vulnerability into publicity. Joan Crawford was back, and this time she was an Academy Award-winning actress. But the next chapter of her life would bring even more controversy. In 1947, Crawford expanded her family again by adopting two more girls, Cindy and Kathy. To do so, she became connected to the Tennessee Children's Home Society, an organization that would later be exposed for its deeply disturbing adoption practices and illegal removal of children from their families. The discovery would eventually cast a dark shadow over Crawford's story of motherhood. Yet, while her personal life was becoming increasingly complicated, Crawford's reputation for being difficult had already become legendary. She could be intensely professional, fiercely prepared, and relentlessly demanding. She could also make life miserable for the people around her. One example came during the filming of the 1954 Western Johnny Guitar, where Crawford clashed repeatedly with co-star Mercedes McCambridge. Their hostility reportedly had a personal history. Crawford had been involved with McCambridge's husband, actor Fletcher Markle, and the resentment between the two women never fully disappeared. One night after drinking, Crawford reportedly took McCambridge's clothing and threw it onto the highway, where passing cars ran over it. McCambridge later described Crawford in brutally unflattering terms. Crawford, true to form, fired back with her own insult, pointing out that with 4 children already, she had no need for another. By the 1960s, Crawford's competitive streak had reached another level, and this time, her biggest rival was another Hollywood legend, Bette Davis. In 1962, the two women were cast together in Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, a psychological thriller that would become one of the most famous films of their careers. The tension between them was already well known, but once the cameras started rolling, they managed to keep their personal hostility under control, enough to finish the film. After filming ended, however, the rivalry exploded into the open. During the promotional campaign, Crawford reportedly distanced herself from Davis, unwilling to share the spotlight with her longtime rival. Then the insults started. Davis mocked Crawford's romantic history, taking a vicious shot at the number of male stars she had been involved with during her MGM years. Crawford responded by mocking Davis's acting style, contrasting Davis's famous emotional intensity with her own quieter approach. It was no longer simply a private rivalry. It had become a public war. Then came the 1963 Academy Awards. Davis had been nominated for Best Actress for Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, while Crawford had received no nomination at all. For Joan, that had to hurt. But rather than disappear into the background and allow Davis to enjoy the attention, Crawford came up with a plan. She contacted the other Best Actress nominees and offered to accept the Oscar on their behalf if they were unable to attend the ceremony. The nominees were all based on the East Coast, thousands of miles from Hollywood, so several agreed. That meant Crawford could attend the ceremony without even having a nomination of her own. Then Oscar night arrived. Bette Davis lost the award to Anne Bancroft for The Miracle Worker. But Bancroft was not at the ceremony, so Joan Crawford walked onto the stage and accepted the Oscar on her behalf. And standing in the audience was Bette Davis. The moment was almost too perfect. Crawford, the woman who had been left out of the nominations, was suddenly standing on stage with an Oscar in her hands while her rival watched from the audience. It was the kind of Hollywood drama that seemed almost too scripted to be real. But for Davis, the rivalry had never really been about awards or careers. Years later, she revealed what she believed was the deeper reason behind their hatred: Franchot Tone. Both women had fallen for him. Davis had been deeply in love with Tone, but Crawford married him instead. According to Davis, Crawford had deliberately taken the man she loved, and the resentment never disappeared. By the time Davis spoke about it late in her life, decades had passed, but the anger was still there. For Joan Crawford and Bette Davis, Hollywood had turned two talented actresses into competitors, and once that competition became personal, neither woman seemed willing to let it go. The secrets she took to her grave. By the 1950s, Joan Crawford had reached another major turning point in her life. Her biggest romance yet was with Alfred Steele, the powerful president of Pepsi. They met at a party and married in 1955. But just 4 years later, tragedy struck when Steele died from a heart attack. Pepsi expected Joan to step aside. Instead, she fought back. The company initially wanted nothing to do with her, but Joan refused to accept being pushed out. She went straight to gossip columnist Luella Parsons and threatened to expose everything she knew about Pepsi. The pressure worked. Pepsi quickly changed its position and gave Crawford a seat on its board of directors. That became another example of the force of Joan Crawford. When she wanted something, she rarely accepted no for an answer. She also understood the value of publicity. While working with Pepsi, she demanded that vending machines be placed on her movie sets. She even pushed director Billy Wilder to include Pepsi product placement in one of his films, despite the fact that the movie centered around a Coca-Cola executive. But while Joan was still enjoying the success of Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, her career was beginning to lose momentum. By the late 1960s, her personal struggles were becoming harder to hide. During rehearsals for The Lucy Show in 1968, her drinking became so serious that she struggled to remember her lines. Producers nearly replaced her with Gloria Swanson. Somehow, Joan pulled herself together for the live performance and delivered. But moments like that showed just how fragile her career had become. Away from the cameras, Crawford's obsession with control was legendary. She demanded an almost extreme level of cleanliness and even hired a maid named Mamacita because of her unusual approach to cleaning floors. Joan wanted things done her way, whether she was on a movie set, in a boardroom, or inside her own home. Her need for control also caused painful moments with her children. When her daughter Christina had to leave the secret storm because of a serious medical problem, Joan offered to take over her daughter's role. The producers agreed, turning what should have been a difficult family moment into another chapter in Crawford's complicated relationship with her daughter. At the same time, Joan was fighting her own demons. Alcohol had become a major part of her life. In her later years, she often carried a flask filled with strong vodka and even had a special refrigerator installed in her bathroom so she could reach for a drink whenever she wanted. By 1974, the situation had become dangerous. Joan passed out, fell, and badly injured her face. The incident frightened her enough to make a drastic decision. That same year, after embracing Christian Science, she stopped drinking completely. Her obsession with cleanliness never disappeared, though. Joan covered much of her belongings in plastic, from furniture and lampshades to hats and shoes. Her home became almost a museum of carefully protected possessions, taken so far that even her interior designer joked about the sheer amount of plastic surrounding everything. That extreme attention to appearance had always been part of Joan's identity. From the beginning of her career, she understood that Hollywood was built on image. When critics complained that she looked too glamorous or seemed too distant from ordinary women, Crawford never tried to become the girl next door. She had created her own image, and she intended to protect it. Eventually, however, that image became something she feared losing. After seeing photographs of herself from a party in the 1970s, Joan was reportedly horrified by how she looked. Rather than simply ignore the pictures, she withdrew from public life for years. The woman who had spent decades making sure the world saw her at her best suddenly decided that the world should not see her at all. There was also a more private side to Crawford that remained largely hidden during her lifetime. Some Hollywood historians and biographers have suggested that she may have been bisexual. Her romantic history included numerous men, but she was also linked to famous women, including Greta Garbo, Marlene Dietrich, and Marilyn Monroe. Much of that part of her life remained surrounded by rumor and secrecy. Even her name carried a secret. Joan Crawford was the stage name she became famous under, but she originally intended it to be pronounced differently. People close to her also continued using her childhood nickname, Billie, long after Hollywood knew her as Joan Crawford. Despite her difficult personality, Crawford had another side that showed just how seriously she took her relationship with the public. She reportedly answered every piece of fan mail she received using custom blue paper and signing her responses herself. She also made a point of learning the names of crew members on her film sets. In many ways, Joan had created the modern celebrity before the modern celebrity even existed. She understood publicity, controlled her appearance, cultivated her fans, and treated every public appearance like a performance. But by 1973, even her relationship with Pepsi finally came to an end. After years of fighting to maintain her position, the company removed her from its board. For perhaps the only time in her life, Joan did not fight back. The age of Joan at Pepsi was over. Her personal life remained complicated to the very end. Crawford had 4 officially recognized marriages, although one biographer uncovered evidence suggesting she may have secretly married saxophone player James Welton in 1924, potentially making him her first husband. Then, in May 1977, Joan's strength was finally disappearing. On May 6th, she gave away her beloved Shih Tzu, Princess Lotus Blossom, because she could no longer care for her properly. 4 days later, on May 10, 1977, Joan Crawford died of a heart attack at the age of 73. Judy Garland reveals why nearly all of her husbands were gay. Judy Garland was married 5 times, and 2 of her husbands, Vincente Minnelli and Mark Herron, were widely reported to have had relationships with men. Her second husband, the legendary director Vincente Minnelli, kept his private life extremely guarded while working in Hollywood. At the time, being openly gay could seriously damage a performer or filmmaker's career, so many people in the industry went to great lengths to protect their public image. Garland's 4th husband, Mark Herron, had an even more complicated story. He maintained a long-term relationship with actor Henry Brandon, a relationship that continued both before and after his short marriage to Garland. Stories like these were not unusual during Hollywood's golden age. For performers living in an era when homosexuality was heavily stigmatized, marriage could sometimes become a kind of shield. These relationships, often described by historians as lavender marriages, allowed celebrities to maintain the polished image that studios, audiences, and the press expected from them while keeping their private lives out of sight. And that helps explain something fascinating about Garland's relationship with gay culture. For decades, many gay men have felt an unusually strong connection to straight female stars. On the surface, that might seem strange, but queer scholars have argued that there is something deeper happening. Academic Jose Munoz described one part of this process as disidentification. The idea is that LGBTQ+ people can take characters, performers, or stories that were never created specifically for them and reshape those stories into something personally meaningful. Garland is a perfect example. A gay man watching Garland could see something of his own struggles in her story: the pressure, the rejection, the feeling of being different, and the constant battle to be accepted. By identifying with her, he could almost write himself into a mainstream culture that rarely gave people like him a place to tell their own stories. But queer historian David Halperin offered a different explanation in his book, How to Be Gay. Halperin argued that the relationship between gay men and mainstream culture could be much more complicated. Instead of automatically embracing gay artists, characters, and celebrities, many gay men could actually become deeply critical of them. Why? Because mainstream representations of gay men were often shaped around what straight society found acceptable. They could be polished, safe, and carefully packaged for a wider audience. And for some gay men, that made these representations feel less authentic rather than more relatable. Halperin also made an important distinction between gay culture and gay subculture. Mainstream gay culture, in his view, has often been dominated by conventional white gay men. Gay subculture, on the other hand, has traditionally made more room for women, drag queens, queer people of color, and transgender people. That difference matters. Some gay men may reject public figures who seem carefully packaged for mainstream approval. Instead, they may find something more meaningful in figures who exist outside those boundaries. That is where someone like Judy Garland becomes especially important. Garland was not a gay icon because she was secretly part of the gay community. She became one because her life, her struggles, her vulnerability, and her outsider status gave generations of gay men something they could recognize in themselves. So Garland's place in gay culture can be understood in two very different ways. Through Munoz's idea of disidentification, she gave gay men a way to see themselves inside a mainstream story that was never written for them. Through Halpern's argument, she represented something almost opposite, a way of stepping outside mainstream gay culture and embracing a figure who felt more complicated, emotional, and subversive.